Well, hey, so thanks, everybody. My name is Jim Perrin. I've got Poorvi Narang with me, too. We are the PMs for the Azure Linux team, and we're here today to talk to you about the slide that we are not on. There we go. Hit it. So we've got a few things that we want to cover today. One is what is Azure Linux? Give you a little bit of walkthrough what we're doing, what we're building, what the intent is. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Azure Container Linux side of things for the containerized and Kubernetes flavored people in the audience. We'll have a little bit of a demo there and hopefully a little bit of time for some Q&A. Poorvi, if you can give us the next one. For those of you in the Linux ecosystem, you might be familiar with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Fedora Linux. Fedora is the upstream innovation distribution that Red Hat uses. And in the Azure Linux space, we're using it as well. We are partnering very closely with the Fedora community. We're working with them for some of the innovation around the Linux distribution. And we want to make sure that the Linux community in Microsoft is able to see what changes we're making, what sort of tweaks we're doing for performance, for Azure flavoring, things like that. So in addition to the upstream communication, we're also looking at a very clear declarative set of differences. All of the source code for the distribution is public in GitHub. We want people to see where we are deviating from what Fedora has done, what the other distros are doing. But the choice for Fedora really helps simplify things. Using them as an upstream distribution allows us to get some of the ISV support that already exists in the ecosystem. It allows us to add our own and contribute that back into the Fedora community where it makes sense. We can partner with CVE discovery, CVE remediation. But a lot of what Microsoft is adding is kind of the program management and value out of the box around the Fedora ecosystem. So we're putting in place the FIPS compliance, FedRAMP compliance, setting clear determinations. Microsoft is famous for Patch Tuesday. We're doing a lot of the same thing here. So you get a lot of that upstream open source innovation and that upstream open source speed, but with the programmatic reliability that customers want for Azure. It's consistent for release times, it's consistent for CVE fixes, and it's consistent across the different application families. So I mentioned at the beginning Azure Container Linux and Azure Linux. They are derived from the exact same sources. The same binaries exist in both. It is completely compatible across the board. So what we're effectively, or what we have announced and what we're talking to you today about is really what we're doing with containers, what we're doing in the VM space, and what we're doing to provide a hardened set of images for people who want an immutable build system that we'll get into in a little bit later. A lot of the value for us is around the kernel tuning, specifically for Azure, for performance, for reliability. A hardware-enabled kernel gives us both the LTS stability that some customers want, but also allows us to iterate more quickly for the customers who want that rapid transition, that rapid turnover. So that's pretty much what we're baking into the distribution along with streamlined management. All of the Azure tools that you're used to using, Azure Update Manager, things like that will all work. That sort of consistency across Azure is something that we're really trying to get into. And if we can, I think you're up for the next. I'm going to hand it off to Poorvi to walk us through the demo. She's got the technical side. I'm here as the smiling face. Poorvi, take it away.
Awesome, thanks, Jim.
Swap up, or no, you need to click.
Yeah, I'm just going to set it up so that I can show you in action what we just talked about. Give me a second here. OK. That is awesome. Oof.
It's OK. We still have 20 minutes.
OK. So Jim talked a little bit about our strategy here behind Azure Linux, how we'll have declarative deviations, which means that we'll reduce the surface area, the CVEs that you might have to patch, And I'm going to show you how you can run Azure Linux through WSL, VMs, and Kubernetes. So, and I hope this works. OK. So we're going to start with WSL. And I am already inside my WSL running 4.0. But I want to show you live here that I'm actually running it on Azure Linux 4.0. So let me go ahead and verify that for you quickly.
You said quickly.
Not quick enough, but so that's what you see there. You're actually running WSL on Azure Linux 4.0. I'm going to start an application here on WSL, and then I'm going to start the same application on Azure Linux VM and on Azure Linux 4.0 with AKS. And so you're going to see how the same application gives you the same experience through 3 different platforms, and that's how you can use one OS everywhere. It's a simple Python application, and right now I just started it in WSL. Now I'm going to show you how this looks. That's not how it should look, but I'm going to do some magic. It's going to refresh into that. And so now you have WSL lit up here, and I'm going to do same thing on Azure Linux on 4.0 on VM and on AKS with our Azure Container Linux, which also went generally available today. Going back to our demo.
While Poorvi is pulling the demo up, one of the selling points that we want to talk about for Azure Container Linux is the immutability, the additional support that it provides. Are you ready to go? OK.
Yeah. I'll give you more time to talk about Azure Container Linux. We're going to do another short demo specifically on that, because I know that's something that people want to hear more about. But onto the VM side of things, we're now going to deploy the same application on an Azure Linux 4.0 VM right here live. First of all, I'm going to SSH into the VM that I've already created to show you that we're running Azure Linux 4.0. And I'm hoping that works. OK, it did. So like you can see here, you're actually running Azure Linux 4.0 on an Azure VM. Next, we're going to go a little bit in depth on what the VM actually has. Onto the kernel version. So I want to show you that we're running kernel 6.18, which is the latest upstream kernel. And we're going to maintain this for the lifetime of our distribution. Next, a little bit on security. So we have emphasized really hard on security when it comes to Azure Linux. That's one of our most important things as being an Azure distribution. And so we have SE Linux. And if you see here, this is security out of the box. So you don't have to do extra configurations to make sure that it's secure. We already have SE Linux enabled by default in enforcing mode.
That's something I think that will make our MVP at the back of the audience very happy to see SE Linux enforcing out of the box. That's a very nice selling point to show how much we care about security in this.
And then another thing that Jim talked about was something called declarative deviations. So even though we wanted to give you the familiarity of Fedora and the trust of Fedora, we're not just getting everything from Fedora. Like you can see here, our image is very lean because we want to make it very optimized for Azure workloads and cloud-native workloads. So the image size is going to be way smaller. And that's why we call it declarative deviations, because we're intentionally deferring and getting things only that our Azure customers need.
One of the things that you will see if you dig into the distribution itself is that we have pulled out most of the graphical stack, where Fedora targets a lot of desktop users, things like that. That's not as exciting for cloud use, and so we are pulling desktop out. We are focusing primarily on cloud workloads, on WSL workloads, on containers. There's no need for a graphical stack. That's added package bloat, it's added CVE complication. We've pulled everything out of the distribution that is not necessarily required for cloud use.
Which results in a very minimal attack surface, fewer CVEs. On the same front, we also have the latest package management with DNF5. And once I show you that it's actually DNF5, I'm also going to show you how quickly it works in the background to install something like Azure CLI, for example. And so now that you can see we are using DNF5 here, I'm going to install Azure CLI with DNF5 within a few seconds. Hopefully less than a minute.
We hope.
We hope.
If the network gods allow it.
Yep. OK. This is now running in the background, resolving dependencies, quickly getting it from the repository, and hopefully it should take not too long now to get you Azure CLI.
It's always tricky doing live demos. This is the part that makes us a little nervous.
Count till 10. 10 more seconds.
OK, in theory, it runs faster than this when we're not dealing with, there we go, OK.
That was really quick. That took us
Pretend that was like 2 seconds, not 12.
I'm going to verify that the right Azure CLI was brought into the image. That's the latest version of Azure CLI that's in our repository. And with DNF5, you can get it into your Azure Linux 4.0 VM image very quickly. The next thing regarding security is also our out-of-the-box firewall de-enablement. So as you can see, firewall D, if I've not already disabled it. Yeah, it's running out of the box. You don't have to do anything. It's pre-configured. That's another thing in our security out-of-the-box philosophy. And now I'm going to manually open a port so that you can see that it's easy to open, but it's still under your control.
We should touch on the fact that by default, the only thing you can actually do with the firewall as it is SSH in for management to configure the machine. So out of the box, there are no additional services running beyond SSH. The DHCP v6 client piece is only there because the IPv6 protocol has a weird ICMP requirement in it to get an address. That's the only thing it's used for. That's the only reason that additional port is open. Consider this just SSH.
And so now I want to show you that I manually open the port, and it's here now. Explicit control, you have to manually allow anything to be enabled. It's security out of the box. And I'm repeating it again because it's one of our primary principles with Azure Linux 4.0. Now I'm going to start the same app, the same Python app that we just saw magically appear on WSL here on the VM image as well. Just going to SSH into that. And that should now be running. Let's see. That one, the same app is now running on the VM as well. And that this just constantly refreshes the CPU usage, memory, uptime. So WSL, for example, is running on my desktop. VM image is the one that we just saw. Going back to our demo, and we're going to see the last part, and we're going to see the Azure Kubernetes service using Azure Container Linux. So
while this is coming up, who in the audience uses Linux on Azure or uses Kubernetes on Azure? Corey, you don't count. Hayden kind of counts.
And so as you can see there, it says Azure Container Linux, which is another thing that we are making generally available at build. It's our hardened Azure Linux image. And I'll give it to you, Jim, to talk a bit more about it while I play the specific ACL demo in the background. But for now, we're just enabling our third column with Azure Container Linux.
The one piece that I would call out on this one, this says Azure Container Linux version 3.0. That's because 4.0 is in preview right now. When 4.0 goes generally available, Azure Container Linux will move to match the 4.0 release as well. So it's only 3.0 while we're in the preview period. When we GA, everything will become 4.0 across the board and be consistent.
And so it says right there, Azure Container Linux 3.0. That's the one that we're talking about right now. And then I'm going to do this so that I can deploy the same app that I've deployed on WSL and VM now on the AKS cluster as well. We have done this verification. Now I want to go ahead and deploy my app. And that should have now happened. OK. Now the final column is lit up. And you can see that all the three WSL, AKS, and Azure Linux VMs are running on Azure Linux. So you can use the same OS everywhere. That's the consistency that Azure Linux brings to you. You can also ping our VM if you want to. That's a long URL, so I'm not.
A slightly interactive version for the demo here.
Interactive version. I don't think there's a chat where I can put this.
One of the key benefits here is no matter how you're using Azure Linux, be it through WSL, through VM, through container, through Azure Container Linux, it does not matter. You're using the same version of Python, you're using the same kernel, you're using the same internal libraries. So if you validate your application on one, you can have confidence that it will work across all of them. So the developer story for WSL into a local deployment area, into your production deployment area, like that's the simplicity that we're looking for. We want to make it as easy as we can across your developer workflow, from local laptop into GitHub, into the cloud, into your AI space. Like we want to make this as easy as we can.
OK, that was our Azure Linux 4.0 demo. The VM image is now in public preview and available to you to use, test, validate, and give us your feedback. So towards the end, we'll let you know how to reach out to us. But now I'll let Jim talk a bit about our Azure Container Linux.
Yep, one down.
Yeah, let me also bring this back to presenter view so that you can talk about it.
You're going to have to, yeah. Not yet, one more. There we go, okay. So for Azure Container Linux, we talked a little bit about this being an immutable distribution. This is derived from the Flatcar Container Linux distribution that was contributed into the CNCF by Microsoft, I want to say last year. I think that landed in the CNCF as an incubating project. And what we're doing basically is partnering with the Flatcar team and with the CNCF to make a productized version based on same libraries. We want that consistency in the use case. So we're deviating from Flatcar a little bit in terms of where the binaries come from, but that is purely for application consistency. We are still supporting the Flatcar Container Linux distribution upstream. We are still heavily engaged with their developer team for new features. We just want the customers to have the product-ready consistency and feel without disrupting what existing Flatcar users are expecting, without trying to change product workflows within Azure or anything like that. So the only reason I bring that up is I've heard some rumors that, we're deprecating Flatcar in favor of, that is not true. They serve different purposes. 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗃 will continue to grow. It continues to exist upstream. We continue to support it upstream. We want it to succeed there so we can do new feature development, so we can help, things like that. All we're doing is consolidating the two immutable images that were in AKS and basically putting them both together in a usable thing that customers can interact with. And I think that roughly sums it up.
We have a short demo for ACL.
In the 4 minutes and 30 seconds that we have left, we can play another video for you.
We already saw this in the live demo where we created an AKS cluster using Azure Container Linux.
If you're familiar with Azure CLI, you're doing a cluster create through the command line. That's basically all we're doing here. Provisions a node, gets credentials, showing the status. We'll give a shout out to Flora, who actually put this demo together, which is why you're seeing her name in there. If you're attending KubeCons, you will probably get a chance to run into her. And here you'll see that we have the ID like as 𝗦𝗃𝗀𝗃. We are basically telling our customers exactly what's going on. This is the one difference, again, for the kernel being a 6.6 based kernel rather than 6.18. When we GA 4.0, everything will be consistent across the board. So we want to make sure that that's clear. Secure boot is set up and enabled. We've got the DEM311 set up so that we can verify the images on boot. Testing to make sure it's a read-only file system. Again, SE Linux enabled by default here. That's a key differentiator. A lot of people in the AKS space currently are looking at AppArmor type things. With 𝗦𝗃𝗀𝗃 and with Azure Container Linux, it really is going to be an SE Linux piece. So this is the one thing we expect to be a little tricky for some customers, is the conversion from AppArmor to SE Linux.
And then, that was Azure Linux 4.0 on WSL, entering preview on VMs. WSL will be a fast follow for preview, and then Azure Container Linux, which is now generally available to use, and an immutable variant of Azure Linux 3.0 right now. You'll see it on 4.0 whenever 4.0 becomes generally available.
We've got a few minutes left, not quite as long as we wanted to take questions, but if there are people in the audience who want to raise a hand, shout, send smoke signals, I am happy to take whatever questions you have. We can talk afterwards. We're really excited to bring a Linux distribution from Microsoft out for everyone to use.
And feel free to reach out to us on GitHub. We have a community call. There are other resources that you can check out. We
do have one question from the audience. Hayden had his hand up. He didn't, but I'm going to call on him as my audience plant. Hayden, what is your question, sir?
Some packages install firewall-D rules as part of the package.
Yes.
So I install Cockpit. It's going to open 8080. Under your manual firewall-D implementation, would I need to then manually enable 8080, or will?
Okay. So the question was around firewall rules. Some packages are designed by default to install their own rules through firewall-D to remove or to make things simpler for the administrators. Some of the packages that we are going to have in the distribution will do that for that same reason. Some of the packages will not. Where we are taking an opinion on that, you will be able to define or to find that both in the product documentation and in that declarative change state in GitHub. So where we're telling people we're making changes and deviations, you can very clearly see in GitHub, this package that we got from upstream was this, we have made these select changes, here's what we have done, and it'll tell you in the firewall setup what's there.
Very clearly.
Thank you for that. That is a good question.
We have 30 seconds. We have a short video that we can play.
Do it.
It does not want to play.
It's not going to play the audio.
the audio?
No,
Just not.
it's not going to give the audio, I don't think. And time.
Please feel free to reach out to us to know more about Azure Linux on our GitHub. I'll put this slide for a second here if anybody wants more information on how you can reach out. You can reach out to us to get the image. If you want to be a partner, a software validated partner on Azure Linux, we'll be happy to guide you through that and have you validated on Azure Linux 4.0.
Are we your last session for today, or is there another one following us? Ah, okay, so we do need to get out.